Thank you so much for joining us for this live stream. I am here with Jim Cress, an amazing therapist, licensed professional counselor, and Dr. Joel Muddamalle, and we have written a book together called Surviving an Unwanted Divorce. This has been a passion project for me, not because I'm passionate about divorce. Divorce is very heartbreaking, especially when you're trying to survive an unwanted divorce. But it's a passion project because the reality is a lot of people are walking through the heartbreak and the crushing weight of walking into a future they never saw coming, and quite honestly, they didn't want. That was my story. And when I survived my unwanted divorce, I became very passionate about helping other people. There were two people on my journey that helped me probably more than anyone else navigate both the healing side, the therapy side, and the theological wisdom that I needed to be able to not just walk through this, but to be able to talk confidently about what the Bible actually does and does not say about divorce. And those two people, of course, are my co-authors for this book. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
You have submitted some really good questions, some tough questions, some questions worth answering. And so, guys, are you ready to tackle these questions today?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with the first one.
It's been almost a year since my divorce, but I still feel stuck in sadness and regret over going through with the divorce. As time goes on, it's harder to remember the abuse and betrayal that led to the divorce, and I long for reconciliation. How do I move forward in acceptance of the life that I have instead of being stuck longing for the life I lost or hoping for something that doesn't match reality?
I think, as you've taught me, Jim, words frame our reality. So I think there's some pretty key words in this question. One is that she longs for reconciliation, and I understand that longing. Look, it's really hard when you finally get through the intensity of should I or should I not separate. And at first, you may even feel some relief, especially if the intensity of the destructive realities inside that marriage were hurting you and causing you a lot of confusion, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of tears. But the longer we get away from the intensity of the initial impact, and for me, the longer I was living in the house by myself, the relief turned into a very strange longing to go back, because going back was going to something that was familiar, and walking forward was walking towards something I didn't know. And quite honestly, I never saw that was going to be part of my life. I never saw that I would be a single woman in my 50s carrying the weight of my family by myself. So I get that longing for reconciliation. And then I also think it's important to look at these words. She's longing for the life she lost and hoping for something that doesn't match reality. So, of course, you've also taught me, Jim, that mental health is a commitment to reality at all costs. So I think there's two key phrases here. I think sometimes we long for reality when we do this game, this mental game inside of our head. And I'm not going to put this on you, but I am going to put it on me. So what would happen to me is I would start longing to text or call the person who for 30 years had been my person whenever something hard happened. And so, of course, I want to do that. It's almost like muscle memory. But in order to justify wanting to reach back to someone who had hurt me, probably more than anyone else had hurt me, mentally I would play this game of minimizing what happened and maximizing the scraps of love that I was getting, especially at the end. And when I did that, it was almost like the children of Israel painting pictures of Egypt in their mind.
This is so wild. I was literally thinking that. Like that exact story.
Like longing for the food they used to have in Egypt and maximizing that thought while minimizing the extreme abuse they were suffering.
Which they probably weren't eating that food anyways because
The
they're
pots of meat and stuff. I know. Yeah.
You're like, no, I'm not quite sure that's how it worked. But I think you're right, Lisa. It really does show how the human brain is at sometimes wired for that sense of reality that we long for. And it's easy and it's so human to try to paint that picture and minimize the reality of the pain and the hardship and the hurt that took place that actually got you into the situation that you're in right now.
That's right. In the book, Surviving an Unwanted Divorce, I talk about a conversation I had with a friend of mine. She called me one day when she was on her way to work, and she was so upset she couldn't hardly even gather her thoughts. And she was sitting in the parking lot needing to go inside, but also needing to process something. And the thing that she wanted to process with me was she'd opened her bathroom cabinet that morning and there were only a few towels left in her bathroom cabinet that were folded by her soon-to-be ex-husband. He always folded towels in a very specific way. Her cabinet used to be full of these towels folded this way. But that morning she opened up her cabinet, and as the towels dwindled in number, it helped her come to this realization of, wow, this is real. And so while it helped her see reality, it also hurt because she felt like he was slowly disappearing from her life. And I understand that so much. And maybe for you, it's not towels. Maybe it's something else that all of a sudden hits you and makes you go, wow, this is real. He really is going to no longer live in this house, And so as we processed it, I said, can I take you through an exercise that's going to be challenging? But I think it's really important that when we start overly romanticizing what used to be and minimizing the hurt that was being caused, can we just interject reality back into this moment of nostalgia? And she said, yes, let's do that. And I said, it's not going to be easy, but it is going to be necessary. And I said, so let's think about when he was folding those towels, he was knee deep in a relationship with another woman. He was having an affair. So was him folding these towels in a special way and putting them in your bathroom cabinet, was it an act of pure love where he was seeking your highest good in every way at that time? And she said no. And I said, he could have been thinking about his affair partner when he put those towels there. He could have been over at her house folding towels the same way. And I don't say that to reintroduce hurt or pain, but I say it because it's important that we stay committed to what's real. And this was a way for her to see the towels kind of in a more sobering reality than that romanticizing that she was doing. And I said, now look, here's the deal. The towels are dwindling. He is leaving, and that is true. And can you grieve that? Sure thing. But I also want you to see an opportunity here. When you use that last towel, this is not an ending. This is actually a beginning. And the beginning is you get to decide how you want your towels folded. You can fold them just like him if you want to. You can fold them in rectangles. You can fold them in squares. You can roll them up in a little knot if you want to. You don't have to fold them at all, or you can actually fold them in the shape of animals like they do on cruise ships.
Love that.
So this is your opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to put a stake in my ground, and I'm going to say, this is an opportunity for me to define how I want to move forward.
You're inviting her to agency. One of our favorite words, aren't you?
That's right.
You weren't forcing her to go there, but creating, even in her brain, you have agency here, which fires a lot of dopamine in her brain at that moment.
Yeah. And it's not to make divorce seem like, okay, rah, rah, here we go. We're charging forward. We get to make all of our own decisions. It's not celebrating divorce, but what it is doing is it's making sure that we don't minimize all the hard that he was putting us through and maximizing just those little scraps of love, folded towels, whatever it is. And I think that's really important. Okay, let's move on to question number 2.
How can I keep from feeling like my life is stalled out while waiting for my divorce to be finalized? I feel like I can't move on or function because I'm afraid of my husband's retaliation until we're legally divorced.
Whew. I really relate to this question too, because I know what it feels like to feel like life is just completely stalled out when you're in that in-between time. you're separated, not feeling married at all, and yet the divorce hasn't finalized. So it's just a really weird state. I want to toss it to you guys and see what you have to say to this question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. I think that there's this really great quote from Charles Spurgeon, and I'm going to paraphrase it. But essentially, Spurgeon talks about when you're in a season of waiting and your season of delay, and it feels like you're stuck, and you're waiting for rescue. You're looking for hope. And he has this like brilliant line where he says that the one who brings rescue, God himself, has never been known to be late. And so it's this kind of like reframing of that moment of being in pause, of saying, wait a minute, I'm waiting for rescue. I'm in this place of longing, and God's timing is also perfect. And so as we're in this place of patience, what do we do? And Lisa, one of the things that I think that is so important, language is vital. In the language of the scriptures, there's a preposition, the preposition through, which is the most important preposition, in my view, of the scriptures. But we don't live in a society that wants to go through anything, do we? You know, like even on the way here, I saw traffic, you know, to get here. My map said, do you want to save 4 minutes? I said, yes, absolutely. I don't even have to think. I'm annoyed that my maps even suggest that anymore. Just save me the time. And so, but sometimes we have to go through things. Sometimes there is no shortcut. There is no route to bypass the traffic. And you sit there waiting in traffic and you make an inch by inch move. And the people of Israel had to go through the Red Sea so they could experience the power of God. They had to go through the wilderness so they could experience the provision of the Lord. Jesus has to go through Samaria so he can meet a Samaritan woman to meet the presence of God. And Jesus has to go through the cross so that you and I today can experience his power, his presence, and his provision. And so I would just say, as you're sitting there in that waiting moment, you're actually participating in something that might not feel like that's what you're doing, but this is exactly what you're doing. You're actively engaging in the preposition through. You're walking through that moment, and you're also experiencing the grace and the mercy of God in the midst of it. And it is still grace and it is still mercy, even if it doesn't feel like that in that moment.
So good, Joel. Jim, I know you really helped me a lot during the different waiting series seasons when I was walking through. My journey was very, very long. The last 10 years of my marriage, I was separated 5 of those. So there was a lot of alone time. I was struggling with the loneliness. I felt like it was such a waste of time. I just wanted to know, like, which direction is my life going to go? Yeah. Am I going to be divorced? Am I going to get back together? And even once I knew that the death of my marriage was there, the state of North Carolina requires that you're separated a year and a day. And I just felt like this is an entire year of my life where everything is just on pause. But you really helped me because during that time frame, I was expressing to you in our therapy sessions, Jim, how intense the loneliness was. And you gave me this advice that I really did not like.
I remember.
And I said, I feel like the loneliness is just killing me. Like I just feel it's like I get home from work and my house used to be full of raising 5 kids and a husband and now I walk in the door and it's quiet, just eerily quiet, more quiet than I'd ever been in my life. And up to that point, I had never lived alone, never. And so you told me, Lysa, I think it's a good idea for you to learn to go home and sit in the quiet. And I remember thinking, I just told you I'm lonely and the quiet feels like torture. And your advice is to tell me to go home and learn to sit with my own thoughts. And then you followed up with something profound that, you know, a sign of getting healthy is that we can be alone with our own thoughts and be okay. I'm probably not saying it exactly right. But Jim, that really wound up helping me, even though I didn't like the advice at first.
Well, it echoes the words of the great philosopher Blaise Pascal, a Christian, who said all of our problems, I'm paraphrasing only lightly, all of our problems stem from the refusal or the inability to sit alone with yourself quietly in a room because you're alone with yourself. And back to Joel, I use this all the time. Prepositions matter. And so when you're wanting that Greek word ek, get me out of, which a lot of Christians have, like, just get me out of this. Okay, that works in traffic. But notice the framing of the question. How can I, and I stop a full stop in the question, how can I keep from feeling, and just stop? The rest of it is like my life is stalled out. Well, right now, I would honor the feeling.
Right.
I would honor the fact and the impact of your life does feel stalled out right now. And to sit with that for a moment, pick up a pen and some paper and begin to journal. So much of that's alive inside a person. To put that down on a page, journaling often is very, very much free therapy. But to go inward and to notice when you're alone with yourself in that, remember the words of Isaiah. When you go through the waters, there's through again, through the fire, through the flood, through all of it, I will be with you. So that's that going vertical to say, God, what are you, now watch, not trying to teach me during this moment, that might be there, but what work are you wanting to do in me? The author C.S. Lewis would say God wants to take us further up and further in. There's a whole reality to don't waste your trauma, don't waste the throughness of what's going on. You're in the messy middle. Let's be honest about it. You're in that part. Notice in your story and narrative, the part of you thought, Jim, wasn't the first time, Jim, you crazy up in there for inviting me to go do that. And yet what I know about you time and time and time again is you persistently, consistently would go do it and say, let me go enter into that sacred chamber of being alone with myself and with God. Often what feels like something ridiculous and you want out, ponder, slow down and say, God, what are you wanting to do in me as I sit in this and go through it?
That's really powerful. One thing that I did during the going through it, besides learning to sit with my own thoughts and be okay, is I decided we serve a creator God. And so if I could make myself do something creative, I felt very close
Is this
to
your
God.
painting era?
Yes, this is my painting era. And the purpose of my painting era wasn't because I'm good at painting, not at all.
She's
I-
cutting it. She's actually very good at painting.
Yes.
No.
Which is honestly Lisa, a little bit annoying to me that anything that you put your mind to, you're like become great at it.
Joel, I do not have one of my paintings hanging in my home or in anyone else's home. So Joel is being very kind. Thank you, Joel. I'll receive your kindness, but also you're not telling the truth. Okay. So here's the thing, though. I really had to challenge myself when I would pick up a paintbrush and I would look at a blank canvas. This was so important that when I put paint on that canvas, the one rule that I had for myself is that I would not judge whatever came out,
Good.
but rather I would stand back and I would look for and find and name the beauty even in the midst of whatever I had painted that was imperfect. And that became such an important visual for me because I was walking toward a blank canvas. I didn't know what my life was going to look like. It would be so easy for me to judge the imperfections of my life now. But doing something creative, there's so many things. You don't have to do painting. You could pick up, like pottery. I've seen lots of women do that, or even men. I know this goes both ways. Sometimes it's the man that has been devastated and is walking through an unwanted divorce. I think it's important to say that. But maybe for you, it's learning to knit, or recently, I've really enjoyed making flower arrangements. Again, none of it has to be perfect, but what it does do is it connects our creative heart with our Father's creative heart, and we just have to promise not to judge whatever comes out, but intentionally look for the beauty, because the more we look for the beauty, the more we'll start to see it, even though our future, you see how it connects,
Oh, yeah.
even if our future is not the perfect future that we thought it would be. All right, let's go on to the next question.
I'm working so hard daily at forgiveness for my partner of 13 years who left our marriage. And I'm wondering how you move forward when you share children and you try to co-parent with the very person that has hurt you. What does this look like, and how can we learn to co-parent well?
I think the first word that I pick up on in this question is, how do I co-parent well? But also, I think even deeper, how do I right now parent well?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot that you guys probably have to say with this question. So I'll just make a quick comment and then toss it right over to you. I remember getting the advice that my kids deserve one healthy parent. And so even before we talk about co-parenting, I want to just mention, like, if you are walking toward an unwanted divorce, if you're trying to survive an unwanted divorce because there was destructive realities in your home, then you making this decision to no longer allow those destructive realities in your home is you taking a stand for your children so that they don't then get these behaviors that they had witnessed and then start repeating them in their own life. But it is going to be crucial that you pursue healing, because your kids do deserve one healthy parent. I had a friend one time that was in a co-parenting situation, and her husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband, was bringing who used to be the affair partner to all the kids' soccer games. And she was devastated by this, and it was really hard for her to see it. And not only that, they would often make fun of her, so it's like the husband and the affair partner, they were now a team, and now here she is as the soon-to-be ex-wife over here trying to cheer for her kids, but feeling just so beat down mentally in the process. And I remember looking at her and I said, prove them wrong. If they're sitting over there accusing you or talking or laughing or making fun of you because they're trying to paint some kind of picture that you're the soon-to-be crazy ex-wife, then prove them wrong. Don't act crazy. If they see you as weak, then don't act weak. Find some kind of strength that you can bring to that dynamic. And one of the strength is cheer your kids on. Smile, laugh, make it all about the kids and make it a whole lot less about the people that are hurting you.
Yeah, that's really good. There's a common theme amongst all the questions that I think I want to just address, and especially for this one, I just want to acknowledge your pain. I just want to acknowledge the deep hurt. The thing that stuck out to me is when you say 13 years, I just think, whew, that is so painful. And I just think that you need to hear that. You need to hear the acknowledgement of the pain. And I've been doing some studying, and there's a little bit of theological evidence behind this, actually a lot bit, that when Adam and Eve come together, the Bible uses very specific language about them bonding together. And often we think of bonding in the context of intimacy, but that Hebrew word, davak, it's actually the exact same word that's used of alligator scales that are like protective of the alligator. It's the very same word that's used of metallurgy with the breastplate, that for a soldier that protects like the innermost like vulnerable part of your body, like your heart. And so I would just say, like, what you are experiencing is the reality of that davak, that bonding that has been ripped apart. And so now there's a wounding that is there. And that's just human. That's so honest. And there's a good God who's walking you through the healing process. And healing is a process. I think one of the things that you might be able to do, and you can do this if this is true, the scenario is our eyes at times are trained to see the things that are negative, the things that were so painful and hurtful. One of the things that might ease this process is to be, and this is going to feel so counterproductive, but by the way, this is the ethics of the kingdom of God. God's kingdom, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, this is exactly what it is. And it's to look at your ex-husband in that scenario and say, okay, does he actually really love his kids? Because the question is about co-parenting. Does he love his kids? Is he doing the best that he can with his kids? And if he is, then you can honor that aspect of what is true. You honor what's honorable, but we can't honor what's dishonorable. But in that process of co-parenting, do you both have an alignment for the best well-being of these children? And if so, and that's true and authentic, I think that might be a path of starting to move forward in this journey of co-parenting. But I'm stepping into therapeutic waters. Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
You do a wonderful job when you do, seriously. Following Joel and Lisa's heart too, I too want to honor, this is hard. It's Lisa's book, that classic book, It's Not Supposed to Be This Way. Let's again start with reality there. Our words frame our reality, don't they? And sometimes the very letters of a word, like, how do I co-parent? Always remember in life, and as therapists we're trained, all of us at this table are trained, we listen for the question itself. Jesus was so magnificent at listening to the very question, how do I and I'd put a full stop there. How do I co-parent? Co means with. And so there is a reality that's harsh, isn't it? When there is a divorce, there is a death of the nuclear family, meaning you, your spouse, and the kids. There are now two nuclear families at one level, right? And that's hard to deal with. So the idea is, can I co-parent? You'd want to look across the street at your spouse, your ex-spouse, and are they with you? Are they with you? Because functionally, I encourage people to first start with being a single parent. Now, that's hard. And saying, how do I parent the way I want to? And a paraphrase of the Serenity Prayer is, God help me, I will control the things I can, which you have some control over, and then let the rest of it go. So he gets over there and he lets them, he's a Disney dad, or they gets to watch TV or buys 5 Xboxes or whatever. There's a level of controlling only what you can, and to think, which your heart may long to co-parent with your ex, it often is not doable, and sometimes in their own spite can say, I'll try to control you back by helping you get angry because I'm going to do things that you wouldn't approve of. How do you then also, one last thing, avoid triangulation? And that would be your kids coming back to you, or this pipeline and conduit of, well, my ex said this, and they said, well, your ex is wrong. You can speak your truth, but just be mindful of the warning of not triangulating and talking and over-talking about your ex as much as you'd want to with your kids.
Yeah, really good advice. And, the first part of this is she's working so hard at forgiveness. And I know with this, you'll have to have appropriate boundaries. But in the midst of boundaries, you want to make sure that your heart is in a place of forgiveness and not bitterness, because then that's where that triangulation can come, weaponizing can come, using the kids, trying to get them on your side. And look, all of that is understandable, especially in really challenging dynamics. And so, like you said, Joel, my heart really goes out to you. Take it one day at a time. Love your kids. When they have to go over to, the time that they're going to spend with your ex-spouse, mentally and prayerfully place them in the hands of God, because that may be a lot easier for you to place them in the hands of God and let God carry them into their second home, rather than just handing them over to a spouse that maybe there's a lot of, or ex-spouse, and where there's lots of tension to that. So, all right, let's go on to question number 4.
What is your best advice for how to move forward into new relationships, especially when you've been betrayed by an ex-husband before and you are trying to be intentional about healing so that you don't bring old wounds into new relationships, but you're still scared?
Yeah.
Ooh, this is a doozy of a question. First of all, when I was going through the divorce and just after the divorce, for several years after the divorce, I kept saying, I will never, ever get into a relationship where my well-being can be so impacted like it was when I was married. So that was me kind of drawing this line in the sand and just saying, like, I'm not even open to this. And I remember one time...
a little clarification of that, too. Just the inside scoop of that is when Lysa says that, what she means is she made that personal decision, but she verbalized that personal decision with the people that are the closest to her.
Yes.
And so she said that to her kids. She said that to Jim and I. She said that to her girlfriends that had been walking, I think of 2 specifically, that were walking through a very similar season. And that built in a sense of accountability for you, where I think maybe you could have been tempted to, Jim has that phrase, and you got to be careful how you say it. Make sure that your picker is not wrong. You pick right. And so I think you have some accountability along that. Sorry. I just wanted to
No,
that.
thank you for that clarification. Yeah, but I remember my oldest daughter, Hope, saying, Mom, maybe you shouldn't use never.
Wow.
Because there may come a day where it becomes a possibility. So, don't put your whole future in this box labeled never, And she was right, because there eventually came a time where I felt like I was ready. And but the most
surfer, loves coffee, is just got great taste,
likes watches.
Yes, I mean,
But it was a very terrifying reality for me to think about even going on a date with another person, even starting the possibility of a new relationship. And so in those years before I was open to dating at all, that's exactly what Jim said. Lysa, you have to be careful because your picker is broken. And if you're not careful, you will, and you don't use this time to really heal, we attract what we are. And so you'll go out and you'll pick someone that feels normal and comfortable. And if you do it too soon, you'll pick the same dysfunction that you just got out of. And the cycle will repeat all over again.
Even if you've committed, I'll never do that again. I'll go 180 away from the spouse who is now my ex. That logic will be there. And it's almost like we say in the 12 steps, Chaz knows this, your best thinking got you here. It's not bad thinking in your mind in the moment. It's like, no, I won't do that. And here's what I'll do. And you'll do the same thing often.
Yeah, yeah. And I did not want to choose that same level of unhealth again.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really important for me to let time unfold and not rush into a new relationship. I did not want to need another man to help me heal from the divorce. I wanted to be healed enough to want the right kind of person. And so that's where I landed.
Yeah, you guys know this. Last week at the time, as we're talking right now, it's just like last week I was in Oxford, which is like, I think the most magical place. And
Joel, are you shining your halo and just trying to make me jealous right now?
Because down Oxford, Alabama, or Oxford, North Carolina, which isn't far from
Oxford, England, my
The real
friend,
one.
the home
Oh,
of
okay.
C.S. Lewis and
just
J.R.
wanted to check.
Tolkien.
Yeah, it's working.
It's working.
I'm jealous.
And I walked into this church, St. Aldate's Church, and y'all, this church has been around for 1,000 years. Can you just think about that for a second? 1,000 years of followers of Jesus walking into this building. And the rector there, that's the word they use for pastor. The rector is a guy named Stephen Foster, and he made this prayer. And there's a phrase in here that really sticks out to me of this question, which is about old wounds. And Stephen Foster prayed this prayer over us. And there's a phrase where he said that he prayed that the Lord would heal our wounds and deploy our scars. I just thought actually my instant thought was like, I hate this prayer because it's like, I don't want, like, can we edit this prayer? Like, how about heal our wounds and erase our scars? Or even better, how about prevent our wounds so that we never even have scars in the first place? But it's fascinating that in order for wounds to be healed, at some level, the honesty of those wounds are going to be scarred over. And where those wounds are scarred over, that scar serves as a witness to the honesty of what you have experienced and what you've gone through. And in the economy of God's kingdom, only the Lord could use such pain and deploy it in such a way that it can bring beauty to you. And so I think of you, Lysa, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at what you've been able to walk through and how you've allowed the time to bring healing. And I think you'd be the first person to say, and there are scars. You can see the scars. I mean, actually physically on your body.
Yeah.
There are scars, and I think about like the year where you dedicated time to like get all your medical checkups and everything else. And you found that what was happening emotionally was taking a toll on you physically.
Yeah.
And that created physical scars as surgeons had to come in and bring healing to your body. And so, like allow the time for our wounds to be healed so they can create the scars that are needed, and recognize that those scars are not a witness of God's displeasure in your life. Actually, they can be a winsome witness of the beauty of what God is about to bring.
And then even when I was ready to date, I was so terrified that I might miss red flags. And it was creating this weird dynamic for me where I would go into a date and just be hyper focused on what's wrong with him. And when you do that, it's really hard to even open up your heart to anything that's right about a person. And so I remember telling my friend, when I go into a date now, one of my number one goals is not to figure out what's wrong with him, but instead to just listen, to just be present, and to figure out what I do want and what I don't want.
Right.
Because this is an opportunity for me to decide that. And, one of the first dates that I went on, I walked away from that date and I thought, I have learned something profound about myself. I don't want to spend the rest of my life talking about shipping containers. Shipping containers are amazing and they're necessary, and it is a wonderful profession. But that's not me. That's not how I'm wired. I want to talk about things like therapy, theology, like ministry stuff. And so I learned stuff about myself that helped me then better define what would be a good fit for me in the future.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that for a moment. You want a healthy me before a healthy we that goes forward. So get a PhD in yourself. Take the time. I would posit with a coach, with a therapist, a pastor, a good friend. But to do, most people I've encountered in therapy have not done their own deeper dive into their own life story, the facts and the impact and the track of their story, right? So I would get a PhD in yourself, and don't waste your pain. Don't waste your divorce. There is much to mine out of that for you during this time.
So good, Jim. All right, let's move on to the next question.
I would like help in making peace with the part I played in the death of the marriage. It's hard when my ex-husband's family has one narrative and my family has another. I also have one, but it puts the blame with him. He left and moved in with somebody else. How can I discern truth, and does it even matter? I carry so much shame as a Christian with a failed marriage, and I want to prove to myself that the betrayal is real and I didn't bring it on myself, but perhaps I just need to let go of clarity.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, I think how can I discern truth, and does it even matter? Truth does matter, but you may not get all of the answers that you want. Sometimes when you're talking about people's narratives, you may not ever be able to understand someone else's narrative about a situation. You may never get to some of the baseline truths that you want. Why did this happen? When did it start? How could I have missed it? How could they support their son? Or how could they support this person who's caused me so much pain? I thought I was part of the family, and now they've just, tossed me aside. All of those things. You may never get some of those answers, but we can't spend the rest of our life doing two things. We can't spend the rest of our life trying to seek answers for these questions that may never come.
Yeah.
And we can't control someone else's narrative. Boy, have I wanted to. Boy,
Of
have
course.
I wanted to step in and hand somebody a piece of paper and say, how you're thinking about this, how you're talking about this, the narrative you're repeating yourself is wrong. Do you want the truth? And you know what? I've never had that epic conversation, even though I wanted to
Yeah.
correct someone else's narrative. But I do think it's important that we understand the pain with divorce is not just usually only with the soon-to-be ex-spouse. The pain is also other people that are around you who, like it or not, some of them will pick sides. It always drove me nuts when people would say, there's two sides to every story. And what I wanted to say is this is not a spectator sport.
Yep.
This is a family being decimated on the field. Why don't we just all step in and help rather than having so much commentary about what went wrong and whose fault it was and all of that? That stuff really doesn't matter. Let's just go where the hurt is and see what we can do to help. So I know you guys have a lot to say about narrative as well.
Yeah. One, I want to tackle this word discern, because the question is how can I discern truth? Once again, I'm going to do a quote from Charles Spurgeon. Spurgeon has this great quote on discernment where he says, discernment isn't simply the determination between right and wrong. It's the determination between right and almost right. And I think this is really, really important because what can end up happening is we try to pick, and Jim, you've mentioned this before, we want to pick black and white narratives. It's his narrative, it's my narrative. It's their narrative, it's not their narrative. And the process of discerning truth is to take an honest look at what is real, what is untrue, and what is almost true. And it's those things that are almost true is where discernment really matters. And here's what the analogy I would give. The analogy is like cancer in the body. A surgeon's first kind of thought is, I need to deal with the cancer. I got to get that area. And the second part is if there's infected area around it, then I got to remove that. The first thought isn't take the whole body organ out unless absolutely necessary. There's a surgical process to this where you go in, you cut out the infected area, you give the right treatment so that you can restore and regain wholeness. And I think part of what ends up happening in this scenario is our discernment gets compromised because we have our view of what the narrative is, and instead of assessing what is actually true. We're trying to demand what is true on all counts, instead of kind of the discernment process. And so, yeah, I would just say discernment is tricky. It's a tricky process that has to be evaluated and done with the leading of the Holy Spirit ultimately.
And ultimately, she's asking, I would like help in making peace with the part that I played in the death of my marriage, because the ex-husband's family has one narrative, her family has another narrative. She has a narrative where it was basically, all his fault. And I just want to say to whoever asked this question, boy, do I get it. I remember when Jim first poked at, instead of, Lysa, you've spent years working harder on him than he was willing to work on himself. So now let's work on you and maybe some parts that you played. And I was so resistant to that, not because I didn't want to work on myself, not because I wouldn't fully acknowledge that, of course, every marriage has difficulties. And of course, both parties contribute to those difficulties. But it was just hard for me because I was not in the realm of just a difficult marriage. I was in the realm of a destructive marriage, and I wasn't making the big, huge, destructive choices. And so anything I would acknowledge that I had done wrong, it felt like I was helping justify the bad behavior, the destructive patterns that he brought into the relationship. And you really helped me see, Lysa, nothing that you did, nothing that I did, justified anything that he did or caused anything that he did. He made his choices, you made yours. But there were some parts that I eventually needed to own. And for me, codependency was a big part, where it was basically me saying, I need you to be okay so I can be okay. So how can I make you okay so that I can feel okay? And then that spun right into enabling bad behavior, looking over things, ignoring things, minimizing the effects of things, preventing consequences that he should have naturally suffered because of some of the choices he was making. And look, there were good reasons that I had for that, because his consequences would impact all of us. And I was afraid of those consequences coming back on me and my kids. So again, these were all things, though, that you helped me go in, like Joel was saying, and with precision, not own what he did.
That's right.
But work on healing the parts that I needed to heal from. And that was a really important exercise.
Yeah, I would start with, for this wonderful question, with what we see these remodeling TV shows do with Demo Day. And that is to go, we're going to take the reality, and before you even get to the part you may have played in the death of a marriage at any level, is to start with a demo day of, we're going to take it down to the studs. We're going to take it down to ground zero, literally, and say, for you to give yourself permission to walk first through the trauma of what has happened to you, the facts and the impact of all that. And that takes some time to explore that. And then I think as you walk, here's our metaphor again, here is our preposition again, to walk through this, then to begin to very gently look in the mirror a little bit, kindly, and say, and go vertical, God, is there any part that I played in this? And I think there should be some lengthy contemplation, not quickly rushing to owning things that aren't yours to run to and feel like this is something I need to own. But take that time. First, though, look at the damage that has been done to you. To is another, I guess that's an infinitive, the word to. But to look at that and then say, now let me look, Father, and really pray in the Spirit, is there anything I've done here that I need to take ownership of?
That's really good. And I like the concept of demo day, because one of the most profound days in my healing that even got me to the place where I could look at myself and decide what areas I needed to improve on, heal from, all of that, was you told me to write out all of my hurt on 3x5 cards. And I wrote one thing on each card and filled up your office floor with those cards. And then you did something so profound, Jim. You stepped back and you said to me, I believe you. And what happened to you was wrong. And that was the day that I realized I didn't need someone else to, like, I may never be able to have that epic conversation where he owns everything that he did and says he's sorry and says it shouldn't have happened. I dream of that one day, but I probably will never have that conversation. But you believing me that day and bearing witness to my pain allowed me to drop down this hard exterior that I'd built around me. And it was so profound just to have another human bear witness to my pain and believe me and say, yeah, this was wrong. It shouldn't have happened to you. And once that was acknowledged, then I started to feel safe enough to look at myself and what I contributed and what I needed to work on. So good. All right, let's move on to the next question.
My husband left me and the kids when I was 1 month postpartum. We had been trying to work through infidelity for about a year. And once he left, I found that he had an addiction to cocaine and was lying about a lot of things. Yet I receive a text weekly saying he's sorry, he loves me, so on and so forth. However, he's not getting any form of help. And so you can hear my baby. How do I cope with these texts?
Whew, this is hard. That's really hard. Her husband left her and the kids when she was 1 month postpartum. That is a really harsh reality. So sometimes we smush together or conflate together the terms forgiveness and trust. And you can work on forgiving someone, and that is a command by God, but it is not an instant command by God that we must reconcile. Those two things don't go together. Just because we've forgiven someone does not mean we automatically have to trust them again. And I hear a lot of broken trust in this dynamic, rightfully so. And I would just like to say that you can work on forgiving him, but when he's sending you text, sometimes maybe those are authentic and sometimes that could be love bombing.
Yeah.
Because of just wanting to win you back. Keyword win,
She's not a prize at the county fair.
Exactly. And so obviously we're not in this dynamic, and I don't want to just make a lot of assumptions about this reality, but based on what we do know, trust takes time. It's broken in an instant, and to repair it takes a very long time. And what I would need to see if I were you is time, and over that stretch of time, believable behavior that he really has changed. You said he's not getting any form of help. If he's not getting any form of help, that's making it really hard for me to believe that his motive is to get you back and participate in a healthy relationship. Things like cocaine and infidelity, those are really serious offenses. Those are really serious destructive behaviors and patterns in a relationship. And if he's not demonstrating believable behavior with getting help and healing for those destructive patterns, then it seems to me only logical that he's going to bring those right back into the marriage.
Yes.
No matter what he says. Words are cheap. It's real easy to say, I love you, I want you back, I've changed. But what has he done to change? That's the big question.
Yeah, and our words frame our reality. I've circled words that were written down, words that were said, such as sorry. The Bible calls us in Psalm 51 for a brokenness and a contrite heart, to confess first, then repentance. Repentance, metanoia in Greek, is to stop where I am, 180 it, and move back the other direction. So I'm listening and watching for movement. He loves me. Already addressed of love bombing, not getting any form of help, and then these texts. So that's not coming in. Where I take men, especially in these situations, is I want you to do the individual work, sir, and I know he's not here in this conversation, and I want him then to get with his wife, not just what you did for yourself, but I want the guy to come in and go fact and impact. Will you forgive me? Back to Offie Amy, there are other words, to cancel the debt. So to be able to say, as I coach a lot of wives, and say, well, you could say to you, forgive you for what? You're not being mean. Forgive you for what? Well, you know what I've done. I'd like to hear for you to tell me, not in texts, what I've done. Matter of fact, even if we're divorced, we could go to a therapist if you're wanting to, out of the 12 steps, make amends, out of the Bible, make amends, and say, here are the facts I've done to you, and here is the impact, what I believe it did to you, before you get to what I call track, and that is, will you forgive me? What debt Are you canceling? And I think for a lot of these guys, they're wanting to do what I will call an ownership bypass. They're just going to bypass right and say, let's just move on all like that. I beg you to not do cheap forgiveness. That's not being a peacemaker. That's being a peace faker.
Yeah. Lysa, Jim, and I do an event called Haven Place right outside of Lisa's house and teach a whole deal on forgiveness. And I'm going to try to summarize that the best that I can. Jim mentioned it already, but the primary Greek words that are used for forgiveness in the New Testament are aphiemi, which is a legal cleansing of the debt, a legal declaration of the erasure of debt. And then the second word is charizomai, and it's an interesting Greek word that Paul essentially makes up. I love this about Paul. He's kind of a funny guy, and he takes two words and he brings them together, charis, which just means grace, and then zomai, a different word for forgiveness. And he brings it together to give us a kind of forgiveness that is grace-laced. Now, this is something that's very, very important. Forgiveness is absolutely a command from God. We don't have any escape hatch from that. However, reconciliation is not demanded or commanded. It ought to be pursued if possible. And so from a personal place of forgiveness, you erase the debt, and it actually has less to do about the other person and has so much more to do about your personal healing. So you can be set free to grow in your own trust, to grow in your own love, to grow in the beautiful future that the Lord has for you. Now, the question of if reconciliation is possible, I want to look through three categories that I typically try to teach of the if possibility of reconciliation. The three things are humility, repentance, and accountability. So humility prefaces the entire thing. I truly believe that humility is the soil of the Christian life, and humility is a three-part movement. It first starts with knowing God. And if we know who God is, my goodness, should it create a sobriety of heart because we're aware of the greatness and grandeur of God. If we know who God is, we know who we are. And if we know who we are, we now know how to rightly relate to other people. If you do not know who God is, you will treat other people like pawns in a chessboard to get whatever you want. And love bombing is absolutely a path to do it. It masquerades as love. It masquerades as the fruit of the Spirit. But at the very center of it is hidden pride, and it is ultimately destructive. Repentance. Jim talked about metanoia. In Hebrew, the word is shuv, and it has in mind. It's a two-part word. It has in mind turning away from, but also turning towards something. The plight of the Israelites in the Old Testament is they often turn away from their sin, but the problem is they turn towards another sin.
Yeah.
So you want to pay attention to what kind of turning is happening. Turned away from one addiction, but then replace it with a different kind of addiction. You see what I'm saying? Or are they turning away from their sin and returning to Jesus in a posture of humility? And the last one is accountability. If there is no accountability in this person's life, that every relationship that they have is a power dynamic, that somebody needs something from them. You know what I'm saying? They're known to a lot of people, but nobody actually knows them personally. These are some red flags to really consider in the process because if you cannot be known truly, then there is all kinds of playground opportunity to live a life of deceit. And I think of the famous saying, I think I first heard it from Jim, but it comes from the therapeutic world. And this is sometimes very hard to hear, but it's also true. When somebody shows you who they are, at some point you just have to believe them.
So powerful. Thank you, Joel. All right, let's move on to the last question.
When, if ever, is it okay to approach your divorced spouse and ask for closure if you didn't receive that?
Well, I've already confessed here that, I would have loved to have had that conversation where, the one who hurt me owned what they did, said they were sorry, sought out in humility, repentance, and accountability, and all those things we just talked about. And I think sometimes what we're trying to get at when we say the word closure is that epic conversation where something makes sense.
Yeah.
And again, I have so many Jimisms. I have a lot of Joelisms too, but in a therapeutic sense, my mind is full of Jimisms, truly. And you taught me one time, Jim, that when we try to make sense of something that makes no sense, we'll lose all sense.
Yeah.
And my brain was stuck on a loop wanting that kind of closure.
Very naturally in your brain.
Mhm.
Very naturally for all of us.
Yeah. And so when I said closure, I wanted it to make sense so I could pack it away, understand why it happened so that it would never happen to me again. And, when that's the kind of closure that we're looking for, I think it's like we want to make peace. We want it to make sense. We want to know where to put it in our brain. But the thing is, even if we had all of that information, why it happened and all of that stuff, we probably wouldn't agree with those answers anyways. And so I think when we say closure, we have to be really careful about making sure that the closure we seek is not dependent on the other person, because you may be depending on them to make choices they're unwilling or incapable of ever making.
Moving on, I would even posit forgiveness means the past, your marital past, will never be different. There's a reality around that. Remember, mental health and spiritual health really is a commitment to that reality. Never forget the last part, at all costs. So the idea is, can you embrace today? And I think this is invigorating. It's full of dopamine and full of the Holy Spirit to embrace the fact that you can. I mean, it's reality. You can get individual closure by, in, and of yourself with God without needing anything, as we've said, on the other side of the street from your spouse, as much as you would long for. Now, when you're wanting closure, I would posit more questions here than answers. What are you looking for? And deeper than that, what are you longing for in closure? And wait, trust but verify. Can you really trust, if it's a him in this case, a husband, an ex-husband, can you trust the closure that he will provide? And again, that is this peace faking, again, not real peacemaking, even within yourself. And then to look at, as you are there, a word we like in the therapy world, we like it in the biblical word. The Bible's filled with this word, agency. Control what you can and let the rest alone. It might be a goodbye letter you would write. Dear ex-spouse, here's what I would long for you. And you might even take it out in the backyard and set it on fire and burn it, release it, bury it. I've had a lot of clients do that, and to say, I release that I no longer, while I might want, I no longer need a type of closure, sir, that you might provide. Because if you provided it, can you really trust it?
Yeah, that's so good. I think when I hear the word closure, I can just speak for myself. I think what I hear is being misunderstood. And that is so painful to think that you've been misunderstood. And I want people to rightly understand me, and I want them to know what I meant and what I didn't mean. And so I think there's a really honest place, a good place that this comes from. And yet we cannot force other people to get to a place that they themselves are not willing to go. And so I would just say, be on the lookout for some attributes in that other person that has the potentiality of a conversation. And I just always go back to the fruit of the Spirit. I just feel like this is such a great indication. I'm fully convinced that the fragrance of the kingdom of heaven is the fruit of the Spirit. And the thing that actually moves the fruit of the Spirit into the earth is the gifts of the Spirit. But the fruit of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness. I mean, if you start to see the fruit evident, then there's an indication that maybe there can be a kind of closure that brings two misunderstandings together. But I think the other questions you have to ask, again, we're giving you a lot more questions than answers, is what is the aim and the intent of the closure? Like, what do you want after it? And sometimes what we want after the closure is somewhat incongruent with the fact of the closure. And so you have to be honest with yourself, are you aiming for something that honestly is not going to happen or is impossible? Or are you aiming for the return to peace, shalom, a rightly ordered world where you can live in happiness and they can live in happiness, and you can pursue the Lord in the place that He has called you to? And so just some things to consider.
I wanted closure as well, so I understand this so much. And I wound up just creating a very quiet moment with me and the Lord that closed that chapter of my life. And it was very painful, but it was really helpful. I have a marked moment in time where I literally closed the book on that space and that time of my life. It was when there was this week that my childhood Bible was found by a girl that I went to college with. She had it in a box up in her attic, and it was just in a bunch of her college books, and somehow my childhood Bible had made it there. And she returned it to me the very week that I knew that the divorce was going to be final. And when I got that Bible, I opened it up and I was flipping through it, and I saw different things written in my handwriting. And there was this one little sentence that I had written in, and it was talking about, with God, you can't serve two masters. But I wrote in there, with your husband, he can't have two wives. And I just remember reading that and being so stunned. I have no idea what that meant, from my childhood days, why I would have ever written that. But that's what I needed. I took that childhood Bible, I took it into my closet, I took my wedding ring off, I put it right in that section of the Bible, and I literally closed the Bible and put it on a shelf. And to me, that was the closure that I needed, and it was just between me and the Lord. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you for being so thoughtful and tender and honest with your questions. I pray that something we've shared today has really helped you, whether you're the one walking through an unwanted divorce, trying to survive it, or you're a friend or a loved one who's supporting someone who's walking through and trying to survive an unwanted divorce. Our book comes out next week, Surviving an Unwanted Divorce. This is the book I wish that I would have never had to write, because I wish this would have never been part of my story, but because it is part of my story, I couldn't possibly keep all of the help and healing that I got to myself. And so this is the book. If you and I were sitting down having coffee and you asked me the question, Lysa, how did you survive? How did you survive the hardest season of your life? This book is what I would give you as the answer. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Joel. And thank you for tuning in. If you want more or you want to dive deeper, certainly get Surviving an Unwanted Divorce, the book. But you can also listen to our Therapy Theology series. We have a whole series on this, and we'd love to have you join us there as well. God bless.